All right.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us, especially our panelists. Today we're talking about the talking dictionaries in the central valleys of Oaxaca, and specifically with Zapotec. We're joined by Brook Lillehaugen, who's an associate professor of linguistics at Haverford College, and a visiting professor, Kate Riestenberg, visiting professor of linguistics at Haverford College, and Felipe Lopez, who's a PhD and postdoctorate degree from the University of California, San Diego. He's a writer, he's a professor of Zapotec, and he's the principal author of the Talking Dictionary in Zapotec in the town of San Lucas, Quiaviní. And we're also joined by Maestro Moisés García Guzmán, who's the Secretary of Culture in Tlacochahuaya, and a professor of English in Tlacolula. He's a digital activist and is the principal author of the Talking Dictionary, the Zapotec Talking Dictionary in San Jeronimo, Tlacochahuaya. And so just as a bit of a background, what does this have to do with producing Mezcal? Well, part of the pillars of Del Maguey Single Village Mezcal is to always have a support in the area of social sustainability or social responsibility, and sort of identifying projects that could benefit the community members in the villages that we work. So in 5 of the villages where we work, and 5 of the families that produce Mezcal with Del Maguey, they speak Zapotec as the primary language and Spanish as the second language. And we've seen, just from an anecdotal perspective, that some of the younger generation in these villages is speaking less and less Zapotec, even though it's quite strong with the grandparents' generation and their parents' generation. So looking for ways to see if there might be potential solutions to help in any way. I was introduced to Kate a few years ago as she was doing her doctorate in Oaxaca, and the concept of the Talking Dictionary came up, and so we followed through, and we had a limited edition bottling of an expression called Boca del Cerro that was produced by Faustina Garcia Vasquez in Chichicapam, and we released it last year as a limited edition bottle that was priced higher because the additional funds from the higher price would go directly to a social project in Oaxaca. So we did that, and 33% of those proceeds are going directly to this project, and identified with Kate, with approval from Brook, that we could try and launch a talking dictionary in the town of San Balthazar Chichicapam, bringing students from the US, the students of Kate's, to Oaxaca, and traveling to Chichicapam for a month and working with the local volunteers there to basically generate this and populate this talking dictionary, which we'll get into more. So that was the idea. We've been put on hold because of the pandemic, but we're going to move forward, and we would really love to be able to accomplish this during our summer window, during your summer window next year. And so this is a way to keep us appraised of the situation, learn some more about some successes that you've had in other villages that already have talking dictionaries, and to see some paths forward, fundraising opportunities for the Talking Dictionary directly through Haverford College and Swarthmore College, and also fundraising opportunities to support the project that Del Maguey has in Chichicapam. And if it's a successful project, we would like to continue introducing this program into the other villages that speak Zapotec. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brook Lillehaugen, and could you please discuss the Talking Dictionaries and their history and how they came to Oaxaca and the successes that you've had so far.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gabe, for having us today, and for all of you watching on the webinar or maybe on YouTube later, thank you for your interest. We're really excited to share about the work that we've been doing and about Zapotec languages and what Zapotec activist work is doing. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So we're going to be talking about the Zapotec dictionaries that are in the Tlacochahuaya Valley, and I'll show a map in a little bit, particularly about our motivations around this work and our experiences around this work. You'll notice that the slides are in Spanish and we'll be talking in English. We wanted to make this accessible bilingually, and we figured this might be a good way. In the question period later, and you'll see on your Zoom, you have an option to add a question there. Feel free to write in English or Spanish. También podemos hablar en español en el periodo de preguntas y comentarios. I'm going to start off, as Gabe said, I'm a linguist. I teach at Haverford College. And then we're going to hear from two Zapotec activists involved in creating talking dictionaries for their communities. And then Kate will have some words at the end. So I want to give a little bit of linguistic context. Oh, that's me, yeah. Before talking about the talking dictionaries, to really understand the global context that they're in. And to understand that, I think we need to look at the whole world first. So there's about 7,000 languages in the world, and about 30% of those have fewer than 1,000 speakers and could be considered endangered. And when there's lots of ways to talk about language endangerment, but one way to understand it would be that within a generation or two, the language may not be spoken anymore. Part of the context around this is that there's an unequal distribution between numbers of speakers and the languages in the world. And so let me explain these two upside down triangles there on the right. So if you look at the language triangle, remember I said there's about 7,000 languages in the world. But if you look at the very bottom, 83 of these languages are spoken by about 80% of the population. So it's not that you just take the world's population and divide it up by 7,000, right? And likewise, at the other end, you see about 3,500 of the languages that have the fewest number of speakers. Those are spoken by only 0.2% of the world's population. And that's kind of the area that we're talking about today with Zapotec languages. These languages don't have the same number of speakers as English or Mandarin Chinese for that matter. And that comes into play when we're talking about language endangerment. Thinking of Mexico, according to the INEGI census in 2015, 7% of the population reported speaking an indigenous language, and probably about 60% of the indigenous languages in Mexico are considered endangered. What is language endangerment? So Yasnaya Aguilar-Gil tells us importantly that it's not that indigenous languages are dying, it's that they're being killed. And she points to the Mexican state as one source of that. And we can consider what are some of the reasons languages might become endangered. And these are many and they're complex. And so I will list some here, but this is a big, complicated topic. So for example, the historical context matters in language endangerment. The modern social context, including perceived value of language, matters in language endangerment. Educational system plays an important role. Access to healthcare and participation in government matters. And the lack of support of the state, or the support of the state, or lack thereof, matters, among many other factors. And I don't want to talk about language endangerment without talking about resistance. And you're going to hear from two language activists who are resisting as soon as I'm done talking. Speakers of indigenous languages have been resisting the forces against their language for hundreds of years, and it can take many forms. Today we're going to be talking about talking dictionaries, which is one form of resistance, but there's many ways that speakers can resist pressures against their language. Practicing local government in their language. Using their language in public spaces could even be a form of resistance. singing in your language, creating movies, comics, writing in your language if you want, for example, on Twitter, working to change the educational system or other public policies to be more inclusive. Teaching your language, of course, is a form of language activism and resistance. And today we're going to be sharing one way that people can resist, and that is through creating resources for their language, including talking dictionaries. And so here I want to describe more about what the talking dictionaries are and how we work. So as Gabe mentioned, we currently have talking dictionaries in 5 communities in the Valley of Tlacochahuaya. The first one started in 2012. All of these are freely available online in English and in Spanish. And if you look at the very bottom of the slide, that bit.ly link will take you to the link where you can see all 5 of those. Importantly, and related to what Gabe said at the beginning, we've had many requests from other communities to create more dictionaries. So the list is long and the work is much to do. And we're glad that it's being successful, and we're glad that Chichicapam will be able to join in. These dictionaries are created by transnational interdisciplinary teams, and all the teams include local Zapotec directors, and you're going to meet 2 of them in a minute, linguists like me and Kate, but also David Harrison, and then Kate and my students. So this is a learning opportunity in many directions. You can see a list there of the other Zapotec directors and some of the other members involved in the team. 2 students this summer, Ali and Nuria, who I don't know, might be listening or might see this later on YouTube. As I mentioned before, the dictionaries are without cost to the community, but actually they're without cost to anybody. They're available publicly online. It's a nonprofit endeavor. The intellectual rights, the intellectual property rights remain with the community. And the local directors are indicated as co-authors on the dictionary. And as you'll see in a minute, more than just indicating the director as a co-author, everyone who contributes their voice to the dictionary is attributed with their name on that entry. So you could think of this as like micro attestations, but we really want all this Zapotec knowledge to be valued and to be named for those who want it. Those of you listening in, I'm sorry, you may already be familiar with the Tlacochahuaya Valley, but if you want a refresher, if you don't know, you can see here that we're really talking about a small area geographically, but the Zapotec language has so many different varieties, and they vary based on the pueblo. From one pueblo to the next, the language variety is different. And so that's why we have different dictionaries for each of these communities. I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can find in these dictionaries. Here you actually see Moisés, who you're going to hear from in a minute. This is an example from his dictionary from San Jeronimo, Tlacochahuaya. All of the dictionaries have all of the entries have different parts. So you can see, of course, at the beginning, you have the Zapotec word, very important. And then you have the translation into Spanish or English, depending what side of the dictionary you're on. The red button with the ear lets you hear a native speaker saying that word. And the name of the speaker is way down here at the bottom of the slide in this case, because we have the video embedded. Points to a YouTube video, and if you click on that, you would hear Moisés explaining about aloe in Zapotec, and then you have another picture. So you can see that these are really rich multimedia resources. And maybe the word dictionary doesn't fully show all of the types of knowledge that we're communicating in these dictionary entries. When you go to search the dictionary, you also have lots of different options. So this is the search mode. You could search, say you really want to know how a particular word is said in Zapotec, or what a particular Zapotec word means. You could certainly search. You can explore by semantic domains. And each dictionary tends to have different semantic areas that the community has really wanted to explore and wanted to highlight. So for example, in Tlacochahuaya, an agricultural town, check out the agricultural section there on plants. There's so much knowledge that is being communicated there. Likewise, if you go to the Teotihuacan dictionary, there's lots of information about weaving and textiles as makes sense in that local context. If you're interested in seeing the beautiful images, you could explore through navigating the images. There's even a button called Surprise Me. Maybe you don't know what you're looking for and you want to just see some things in the dictionary. We never wanted someone to come to the dictionary and encounter a blank page. So you could even click Surprise Me there. Before I turn it over to the Zapotec activists, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we see these dictionaries intervening in dangerous ideologies around Zapotec language. one ideology that you can encounter in Oaxaca and certainly elsewhere in the world is that that public spaces in Oaxaca are usually constructed as Spanish language spaces, right? And it wouldn't have to be that way, right? That's a construction. And so this dictionary is these dictionaries are interventions in that, because it is a very public use of Zapotec language. So if the ideology is that Zapotec only serves in the Zapotec Pueblo, then here using Zapotec in this global public space is an intervention against that. Another false belief is that Zapotec languages are somehow traditional, that they don't change, that they're connected to the past, and they don't have value in modern society. And while, of course, Zapotec languages are connected to the past, they're also modern languages spoken by people today, and they can change, and they do have context in a modern society. And these dictionaries are an intervention in that way as well. They use modern technology, and they can be a space where you can show language change in a positive way. So for example, Dr. Lopez, who you'll hear from in a minute, wanted to come up with a Zapotec word for poetry. So consulting with some other Zapotec speakers, they came up with this word, bishnash, sweet words. And that new term then is in the dictionary. And so the dictionary then shows this isn't a language frozen in time, right? This is a language that can change like any other language. Zapotec languages in the Tlacochahuaya Valley usually are not taught in schools, and often they're perceived of as not having any scientific or educational value. This is absolutely not true, and I'm sure you'll be convinced of that after you hear Felipe and Moisés talk. And these dictionaries really show the depth of the scientific value of these languages. And one area in that is ethnobotanical knowledge. And so I'm going to stop sharing and pass this to Dr. Lopez.
Okay, just a quick follow-up before we go to Dr. Lopez. I think you explained it clearly, but part of the reason why it's complicated in Zapotec is because it's an oral language, correct? And so there can't be a sort of universal method to rescue an oral language because it changes from place to place. So even though the orthography isn't going to be agreed upon everywhere, how can the community members learn from these multimedia platforms and visually learn the language?
Okay, so first of all, it's interesting. Let's talk about what it means to be an oral language, right? So any language that's not signed is an oral language, right? So English is an oral language. And Zapotec actually has a long history of writing dating back to 2,500 years ago. So Mesoamerica is one of the 3 places in the world where written language developed. So Zapotec has a long history of writing. And it is true that most Zapotec speakers today don't write their language. And that's because of disruptions and not because of anything that has to do with the Zapotec language in and of itself. The other point being that there's so much variety in Zapotec languages. So when often people talk about Zapotec language, they think it's one language. And maybe there's variation like in English. But Zapotec actually is more on par with the whole Romance language family in terms of diversity. So if you think about French and Portuguese and Italian, this is the type of diversity that we're talking about in the family. So there just are a bunch of languages. And then it's true that the diversity from town to town is exceptional. That is uncommon, and there's a lot of diversity even within a small space. Gabe, you asked about then learning. If people aren't usually writing their language, how might they use the dictionary to learn? And I think Moy and Felipe might have more thoughts on this. But I think the dictionary, the best way to learn Zapotec is to learn from speakers of Zapotec. And so we're not hoping that this dictionary is the way that someone would learn the language. I think people, first of all, the audio is available on all of the entries. And so we could basically even not write something and you could still have a form available. I think for people who want to learn words or be reminded of words or learn more about concepts, this might be a resource, but I'm actually not sure I would recommend it as a way to learn the entire language. My colleagues might have more thoughts on that.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that's a good segue into Dr. Lopez. And if Dr. Lopez can present, that would be amazing. You might still be on mute, Doctor.
Can everybody hear me now? Yeah. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, sa ko ri la da yot stios yot bes na yot non ren shi hitla wen de shamo ka yen chi za station shamo de yen ke ni ti station chiru shu yen chi ka be ra ni bi ni zidro chiru ra win gol ro chil e gol ro station. Hi everyone, thank you for being with us here today. So my name is Felipe Lopez, and that's my picture, as Brook would say. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my involvement in preserving my language through various means, especially through Talking Dictionaries, how the Talking Dictionary has helped me preserve the language, but also indigenous knowledge. So, and then I am from, let's see, it's not working. Oh, what did I do here? Sorry, guys. I might speak Zapotec, but I did. Can you guys see my screen? I don't know what happened.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Okay, as I was saying, this is San Lucas Quiaviní on the map, and this is a picture of my town from last year when a bunch of students from Haverford went to San Lucas in order to take pictures about plants, and also as a Zapotec speaker, even though I do speak the language, there is still a lot of the words and the community knowledge that I'm not aware of I've lost because I've been out of my community for so long. And we went to the top of this mountain, Cerro de Quiaviní. So we collected plants and name of plants all throughout our route, which took us about 3 hours to get to the top of these mountains. And this is the team that I went to with, and then in the background you can see my community. And actually this is the original old town. My town was established in 1587. Okay, so as I said, last year we went there, and also my involvement with the Zapotec Reservation. And just before I talked about Talking Dictionaries, I just wanna talk a little bit about how I got involved in my community. Why am I doing this? You know, it's a lot of time, and then as I think the group mentioned earlier, the concept of indigenous language is seen as something of sometimes not of value, but what's the value for us maintaining the language? Well, I think that for me, it's just leaving a legacy, and it's one of the reasons that I started working with my language. I migrated to the US in 1992, and actually that's one of the times that I realized the value of my language, that a lot of the immigrants who was coming to the States, they were using more Spanish or English in order to communicate with the younger kids and their sons and whatnot. So I saw the need to preserve the language, and I seek out the help from linguists, and we worked on a trilingual dictionary. And I think that Gabe talked about, you know, if we don't have a writing system, right, how do we go about it? And I think that we were able to come up with an orthography. And yes, it is for my community mostly. And as you hear from Moisés, that there are other ways of writing Zapotec. And I think that one of the things that we always talked about is just do it. I mean, because that's, the fear is that on the one hand, right? So if you feel that how do I write my language, right? And so it becomes this kind of a cycle that you don't do it because you don't know how to do it, right? And so you just go in circles. So one of the things that we did is just writing it. And I think this is the very first step Uh, and I was very fortunate to work with these linguists, and I've been working ever since, just writing and also learning more about my language. So as I said, last year we went to my community, and then I I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know talking to older folks. So, you know, in terms of use of plants, and that's a very specialized knowledge. It has a scientific value. It is, you know, the medicinal usages, and also it's a historical codifier, and also you use it in rituals. And here we have one of the entries that the students help to upload. And as you guys can see here, it's called Scarsidad wall, right? So, and then we say it's a type of plant. And as you can see, even it's very specialized in my language that I don't even know the the Spanish word for it. So we just like, you figure, okay, so something's used there. Maybe we'll figure out what the name or scientific name might be later. But the important thing for us was just to upload it and then say, hey, you know, we have this word that it is used, for example, here. It says que se usa para esplasmo y extraer astillas, right? So you put in your hand if you have an astilla. Now I'm forgetting what the word is in English, but and then it extracts it by just putting it there. And then Gerardo Lopez is the one who recorded the word, and Brook said that we're giving the credit to the speakers, right? So it's an example of the work that we did last year. And then we have another entry here. That's another type of plant. Again, it doesn't have a translation, neither Spanish or English. And then that's for, if you have stomach pain, that's what you use it for. Okay. And so we have Quandine, another type of plant. So as you can see, this type of knowledge, it's really hard to maintain, especially as more and more non-Zapotec medicine is being introduced to the community. This knowledge is being lost because the younger generation are not learning about it, and it's not being passed on generation to generation. And especially in an immigrant community such as mine, where we have about half or more than half of the population living in LA. So these are also some of the pressure that it's forcing us to speak or use Spanish more and more. So again, we have another plans here, but this one is sort of a historical codifier, right? So as we were talking to people from my community, they were telling us that what we call geixro or biznaga grande, this was used to make tortillas when the times were bad. They didn't have money, or there wasn't a lot of, there was famine because of the rain and whatnot. So this it's a local plant that they use to maintain themselves. So if I had not gone, as Gabe might say, into writing it and making it available to people. And I think that one of the most important things that for me, the online Talking Dictionary is that accessibility to the immigrant community, because I think it's one of the most effective ways that we can promote it, not just in the community, but also globally, right? As I mentioned earlier, I work on a published dictionary, which we had about 500 dictionaries were published, and they're very expensive, right? And they're static. And also, you know, when you choose, like, what are you gonna spend money with? Are you gonna spend money buying a dictionary or buying food? So I think that people from my community, they have so much limitation in order to have access to the published dictionary. However, with the online dictionary, it's free. All you need is a phone, like a smartphone that you can have access to the dictionary. And so you can see the value in the Talking Dictionary, because people from the community can have access to it easily, as well as immigrants. But also in the published dictionary, we cannot go back and add words, because it's gonna cost us a lot of money. And in Talking Dictionaries, we have, you know, we can go back and Sometimes I find out that one word has different meanings, or people say it differently. We can always go back to the Talking Dictionaries and then make the modification. So I think that's a really, really flexible way of promoting the language, maintaining the language, and making the changes, right? So I think that's such a great way of preserving language and also knowledge and the memories. And so here we have some of the plants that are used in ritual, sometimes especially for El Susto. So we have yellowish, I see only a tree, but people with that specific knowledge, they see more than a tree. Is something that they use, for medicinal and also ritual purposes. For example, this is they use it for the cure of a susto, as you can see here. So it has a lot of, at least here, 2 different usages for the ritual and also for little. It says here. Okay, so if a little, if a little chick is not, is not born like out of the egg, and they would put, they would burn the seed, so the little chick will catches the word, I guess. Okay, so and then we also have other types of knowledge which are in danger, such as the value of typomonic values, right? The historical value of the community, the names, like, where did the name come from? What does that mean in terms of like my town? When we think about San Lucas Quiaviní, the second part is, it means Givni in Zapotec, which means transparent stones. And so that's a reference to a specific location where my community used to live before. So when they created this our current town, they continue to, they kept rather the name in which they identify with. So one of the things that we also did during our summer in Oaxaca is also collecting the name of the mountains and parajes, places. And at least I learned so much about it, because to my really nice surprise, with our guide, who is my uncle, Gerardo Lopez, as we were walking to the mountains, we would stop and say, hey, stop, this place's name is, and he would give us to us in Zapotec. So we just collected so much information, and also something very unexpected. He said that he would create a map. And I mean, I wasn't expecting, as you guys can see here, there's a map that he created in his own way of writing Zapotec. And so you can see here, the delineation between San Felipe, another town that we border with. And he has the name of these places in Zapotec. And it was just such an incredible knowledge that he has, that now we have preserved this in a map that we will pass it on generation. And then the meaning of these places that, as I said, has been lost, now it's preserved. And as an example here, Kibdan, which is the name of the mountain, right? That now we are able to put in the Talking Dictionary. So in a way, all the knowledge that we were able to acquire and learn, now anybody can go online and then check it out. So I really invite you guys to look at the Talking Dictionary from Quiaviní, and you'll see embedded tweets and other cool stuff. So I'll stop there. So if you have any question, we can, I will answer your questions, and I'm gonna pass it to Maestro Moisés.
Okay, wow, that's fascinating. And we as Brook mentioned, we call it, you call it a talking dictionary, but it's almost an encyclopedia, multimedia encyclopedia, because there's so much information. And the cultural depth that you can get into with the maps and with the medicinal plants and their uses, it's really incredible to see that. It's a glimpse into to the culture more than even just the language. It shows so much more. So I guess just one quick question about that is how in these communities, in your community, it's clear that you lost half the population to immigration. When is it clear that the language is in danger and that it needs activism? Is it mostly because the younger generation might not be speaking it? All the multimedia resources are in Spanish. The schools aren't teaching it. At what point? Where's the tipping point when you realize that activism is one of the only methods left to help preserve the language?
Good. Okay. So as I mentioned, when in 1992, when I started college, and I realized that more people are speaking either Spanish or English, because a lot of parents, and I think that Brook mentioned that the pressure for parents or for kids to recur to a language that has monetary money, right? So in other words, parents, they see that if they went through discrimination because of the language, right? And also they see that if you speak Spanish or English, you have a better chance of accessing better jobs or education. So what I saw in LA is that sometimes people would, even if they didn't speak Spanish or English perfectly, they would rather speak their kids in Spanish or even English. So they would just, completely omit speaking to the kids in Spanish. So at that point, that's when I became aware of the need to be active in preserving the language, because I figured that if the language was going to be lost sometimes, I wanted to have something to show that the language was spoken once. But luckily, we are a long way from that. But the population, it's speaking it less and less on both sides of the border, even in my community, because sometimes kids feel like it's cool to speak Spanish, right? So they do that unaware of the impact in which they're having in the community, but more as me being very sensitive to this, to the loss and the issues of lost language. That's why I became very active, and hopefully now that with the Talking Dictionaries, younger generation, especially immigrants, can have access to it, because I've gotten some call and say, hey, listen, can you help me? I want my kids to speak Zapotec, and I can point out to them and say, hey, we have Talking Dictionaries that you can have access in California. So yeah, at least that's what's going on in my community.
Okay, that's fantastic. I have a couple of other questions, but I'll leave those for both of you at the end of Moisés' presentation. So let's without further ado,
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Zakčízate jobtuš, tjostan, jobtutekia jobtudan. Lokibrete ilion jobtu, shikadunute fitnit stechno. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for watching, and we're going to share with you what is it that we're doing to prevent our language from being lost. Specifically in the town of Tlacochahuaya, we have this, the way that we introduce the language is, first, well, let me talk about a little background about myself. I was the Secretary of Culture in the last administration, municipal administration, for 3 years. I currently teach English at a high school in Tlacolula. The main topic in our case, or the main use that we have for Talking Dictionaries, is to have a link with diaspora communities. That has been the major impact that our dictionary has had in the community. From a personal experience, when we migrate, that's when we really see the value of our cultural features, food, language, customs. So that's when we really pay attention and go back to where we're from and try to position this identity abroad. And I think knowing that from a personal experience, I knew that this dictionary was going to be of great use in that field, in that area. So in this case, for example, the community of San Jeronimo Tlacochahuaya is located in the central valley of Tlacolula, about 22 kilometers from the capital city. And as the rest of other communities in this valley, it has a lot of migrants who live either in LA, Chicago, New York, and also elsewhere within Mexico, in Monterrey and other big cities, Mexico City. So when we started this dictionary, we aimed at that population because there were so many requests and so many inquiries about language material. Did we have some websites, videos, or something that would take them back to the culture? So in that sense, the dictionary was of great help, especially to diaspora communities in California, in Los Angeles. There, they organized a contest of Señorita Oaxaca, USA. And one of the features that they took into consideration was how this young lady would know some of the history of the town, some of Zapotec expressions, some food recipes, how she would display or how to wear the local costume. So we were in touch with this family because they were asking so many questions. They wanted to know information about that. So besides providing that information to them directly and speaking to them and telling them and guiding them through this process of the contest, well, we also used the dictionary to help them, particularly the contestant, but also community members, because we have also many activists in LA that sometimes organize fundraisings or other activities to help the town back with funds to improve, for example, the health clinic or to improve conditions in local schools. So these activists were also relying on the dictionary to help spread the knowledge with community members who lived in LA. And the participation of this young lady, her name was Carla Vanessa, was exceptional in this contest. And it was thanks to the connection that she had with us as activists and with community members. But also she didn't only learn about this, but she also helped to spread the news. She helped to tell other members of the community that something was being done in the town to preserve the language. And that something was the Talking Dictionary and played a very important role in this. Now, since we are working in the community as well, one of the things that we did in the last summer, here is the picture with Dr. Lillehaugen, Dr. Felipe, and other scholars who were there in the town. We visited the town's council and explained to them what was the main reason of the students being present, so that we are working closely with the authorities. Sometimes, sadly, not all authorities participate or are willing to cooperate with these efforts. However, in this specific administration, we had the education council member who was really, really supportive, because it was during his administration that we also filmed the documentary, Visa Navani. And not only that, we created a link with elementary schools and kindergarten. So we had twice a week, we had sessions to teach Zapotec to kids. So we had 2 hours a week, Monday and Wednesday, working in elementary school, and also twice a week in kindergarten. So it was really, really because of these efforts that the rest of school administrators and members of the town council who were enthusiastic about these progress that is being made thanks to the dictionary. So it's not only getting the information, but now is creating these efforts, these activities with the authorities, and also engaging with other sections of the population, specifically schools. This school year, the administration changed in December. In January, we have new members of the council. I had a presentation with them last week. And these new members also support these efforts. Because of the pandemic, we are not present in schools right now at the moment, but I know they are planning on something. I know they are looking forward to starting these sessions again, because they want kids to continue to have this exposure to language. And especially now that the president of the town is an elementary school teacher, I wanted her to see the value of this as a teaching tool for elementary school or even for kindergarten. These dictionary, and especially now that because of the pandemic, we are transitioning to everything online. Well, this is a very good opportunity to present our dictionary as a tool to be used in schools. So this is the presentation that we had with the authorities. Here is the young lady who participated in the contest in Señorita Oaxaca, USA. And as Brook mentioned earlier, all participants in the dictionary, well, they get their name mentioned because we want this knowledge to be credited, if that's the right word to use, who were the participants. And also sometimes we have some differences in speaking between men and women, between people from one section of the town and the other section. So that's why it's very important to give credit and to mention the name of the person, of the speaker, so that we know if we find some of those differences while collecting the data. This is Ms. Rufina Blas. She worked with us last summer, and she is a new addition to these members of the community who are helping in gathering all this information beside the others who also have participated. And well, this is pretty much what we are doing in San Jeronimo, Tlacochahuaya. This is what the efforts look like in real time and in the field. I know when we have all the information already uploaded, and even when it's uploaded, it still requires a lot of maintenance. Sometimes the writing proposal of the word, sometimes the audio file. So there is a lot of work after gathering the information, but this is pretty much what we're doing with that, and how we are not only gathering the information, but creating links to the community, to the schools, to the activists, to other activists, and to authorities. Thank you very much. If there are some questions, we are willing to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maestro. That was fascinating. With both of your presentations so far, we've learned so much today already, but it's really, really pertinent to think about the effect that this could have on the diaspora community. one thing in a diaspora, the community members tend to live together, but they also tend to intermingle with other Oaxaqueños in California, for example, right? So even though these dictionaries are presented from a single community perspective, is there a melting pot in Los Angeles, for example, where they're bringing together words from different regions trying to speak Zapotec? Or is it harder to stay disciplined with the Zapotec from one community, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think that's a really, really interesting question, because what migration has done, at least for my community in LA, is that now people from my community are marrying other Zapotec immigrants in LA, right? Mm-hmm. So you have these two variations, which, for example, I know of one family who is part of my family who married somebody from Santana del Valle. And we have a very similar variation. So the older, like the parents, tend to speak Zapotec with each other, these two variations, but the wife and husband tend to speak in Spanish. So that's, yeah, that's, I don't know what to make of it, but I don't know if that's this melting pot of Zapotec, but you know, this community who are marrying from different communities, from other communities. So I think that it's very focused on the family, not in a larger Zapotec melting pot, you know, trying to come up with new concepts of words so they can understand each other. I don't know if that makes sense.
I really like Gabe's question too. And I don't know if the dictionaries directly respond to that, but if you had that really good question, you might like what I just put in the chat. There's a link to where you can actually compare across the dictionaries. And so there you kind of see all the varieties side by side. The one I put in there, I think you should see guava in like 4 or 5 varieties. So we've used that sometimes when building dictionaries, when people can't remember a word, or maybe the community is not using that Zapotec word currently, then sometimes people can be reminded by saying, hey, in this town, they say it this way. Sometimes that triggers a memory. Or sometimes people choose to recover a word that they maybe currently are using a Spanish loan word for. People can choose to then retake an older Spanish word sometimes. I'm sorry, an older Zapotec word.
If I, you know, something that we're doing right now, we have this project, teacher project, that we do Zoom meetings twice a week, and Moisés is in it too. So what Brook said, it's really interesting because we've been looking at some words and some colonial documents, right? And then we take one word and say like, hey, does it exist in your town? You know, how do you say it? So we have 7 different communities at the same time in the Zoom dialogue. And somebody say, hey, we still say it. Like I probably Moisés is going to help me here. There's a word for that we were discussing, and to mean young, or you know, that they still use nowadays, but the meaning has been transformed, if you will, over the last 500 years. But this community of 7 people from different pueblos, right? We're talking about it, and we're discussing like, okay, how do we go about learning more about regaining some words that have been lost all these years into our current everyday speaking, whatever.
Yes, one of the things that are really interesting in this type of projects, not only the Talking Dictionary, it's a very interesting feature that Brook mentioned. Well, how do we say one word across variants, right? But especially now that we are doing this conversatorios, we came across some words. For example, we talk about bourgeois, like amo, lord, or owner. We talked about how different they meant in each town. The meaning was different, but also how similar sometimes is. So this is really interesting because now these talking dictionaries, these exploration of documents are helping to build a group and to have like cross-checking languages. This is really, really fascinating. Maybe something that we didn't have before. We didn't have these tools, these resources, these talks, these sessions to analyze it. Well, now we do, and it's thanks to this. It's thanks to these efforts that we are doing, that these knowledge, that these projects are progressing over time. And that's what really is the interesting part of this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that's leads into my next question, which is, it's really great to see how the projects are progressing in each village. It started out with the students coming, but from there it's evolving into more and more projects, whether that's education in the community or more participation from the local authorities, and seeing how it's progressing and how people, and this is what I'd like to know, were they initially skeptical? And if they're initially skeptical, what were some steps you took to get participants and convince people that this was going to be a worthwhile project?
I can speak as kind of the outsider academic, and then maybe I find that building trust takes a long time, and it should take a long time, right? You can't show up one day and expect someone to trust you or a community to trust you. And so I think one thing that has allowed us to have the success that we've had so far and to continue to be able to working is that we keep showing up. We keep showing up every summer. We keep doing the work. We wish we were there this summer. But even we're not there this summer, we're doing the work, right? We're still working on the dictionaries this summer. And I think it's with that long-term partnership that trust is possible. And for a while, we were growing, but it was all people that kind of those of us on this call and other close colleagues knew. And something interesting happened last summer is that folks started to come to us that none of us knew and ask, we want a dictionary in our town. That was a shift, I think, that we all felt, that now it's outside of our circle and people had heard about it and people were coming to us wanting this. And that feels like a positive shift. And again, you know, we hope we'll be able to respond because this does take a lot of work. I hope that was clear. I think we focused on the joy. There's a lot of work and hours behind that too.
Yeah, I think that for us, at least for this end, as an activist, it is my responsibility to go and talk to, when we started the dictionary a long time ago. Before we did any work, I made an appointment with the Cabildo and then talked to them and then convince them that, that it wouldn't cost them anything, but just to ask the permission to be in the community and also to have access to the pueblo, because as you know, in many communities, if you cannot bring people who don't belong there for no reason without involving the Cabildo. So for us, it's our responsibility to lead that conversation and then present the people who are involved, and then also convince the people that that's something would be beneficial. There would be some benefits to the community without costing the community anything but just their participation. So it sometimes is really, really hard because, there is a lot of mistrust sometimes from the Cabildo, which, they're rightly sought to be distrustful of people coming in. So, but for us as activists, I think that we need to ease those tensions. We need to convince them, and we need to talk to the different people that need to be involved, and to older people, like why should they give us their time, right? Why should they talk to us? So it's a very arduous work, but I think that many of us have done we already laid the foundation for this to happen. So, and I know that other activists, and I think that also Moisés has had different experience than I have, but that has been my experience since I began to work with Zapotec and linguists.
Yes, I think one of the main things that we need to do and that we are doing is presenting the team to the authorities, explaining clearly what is it that we are doing, and showing them hands-on. Okay, here is an example of the dictionary. Here is how it works. This is how community members can benefit. But most important, I think, is putting younger generations as the aim. Not that we have to or we want to work specifically with them, but they are a very important section of the population that we are worried about in terms of language preservation, because this also involves not only the language. This is exactly what we have discovered throughout the years that we've been working with the dictionaries. It's not only words. As we start discovering words, then we go to stories, then we go to food recipes, then we go to knowledge. So it's a wide range of information that we need to preserve for younger generations to know about. So building that trust has been, I think, the key element here, because communities, authorities are aware of the presence of the students and the real goal that we are pursuing.
I'll jump in here if that's okay, because this is now related to kind of what I wanted to mention and highlight here. I'm not sure what people know about how linguists usually work, and it is true that in the field of linguistics there has sometimes been a more academic approach, or even an extractive approach, where linguists go into a community and are documenting the language for purely academic purposes, and that information sort of stays in the academic community, and isn't a collaborative approach, and isn't sort of a community-led endeavor. Those kinds of projects exist, and it's something that we as linguists, especially those of us who don't want to work that way, are still sort of trying to flip on its head, right? And so one of the things that most excited me when I joined the linguistics department, where Brook is and where David Harrison is, who are sort of the original drivers of the Talking Dictionary projects, what most excited me about these kinds of projects is that they really aren't that way. These talking dictionaries are fully meant to follow the lead of the community members and what they want to see in the dictionaries, right? It's, you know, we can make suggestions. We're happy to help if you're sort of lost and want suggestions, but that's not the point of the dictionaries, is not to document what Brook wants in it, or what I want in it, or what any other outsider from the community wants in the dictionary. The point of these dictionaries is to document the kinds of things that you saw Felipe and Moy show that are important to them as community members. And it's just been so neat because, as Felipe mentioned, you can continue to add words over time, over years and years, add new words, get new people involved, young people, old people. And as Moy explained, these are dictionaries that are accessible and free, with the full copyright belonging to the community, and they're free to anybody who's interested. Of course, they are not actually free to make, which is part of why we're doing this talk, is that we do need that kind of financial support. You know, they're not crazy expensive to make, but they do require technical maintenance. You know, they're hosted at the university, and they do require occasional maintenance and adding new features, right? Being able to have video, being able to add tweets. Those were not things that were originally there, but they're things that the community members that we've been working with, like Moisés and Felipe wanted to have in the dictionaries. And so, you know, we've got technical folks who can make that kind of thing happen. And there's, you know, people need to eat while they're working on Talking Dictionaries. When it's appropriate, we try to make sure that there are stipends for community members who are working on Talking Dictionaries. Equipment should stay with the community members so that they can continue to work on these projects after the students leave, after, you know, when the outsiders that are supporting the project are no longer there. It's important that there's equipment for the community members to continue to work on the dictionaries. And so, you know, these projects are never finished. As a few people mentioned, we're even working with students this summer remotely. So there are 2 students this summer who are doing things, you know, it's sort of a mixed blessing in a way, because they're doing things that sometimes really never get done, because, you know, when you're busy in the community talking to folks and taking pictures of plants, and, you know, that's a sort of a really exciting part of this. But sometimes just some cleanup work needs to be done. Videos need to be edited. Audio files need to be edited. Missing, you know, translations into English and Spanish need to be added. I think Felipe mentioned, you know, we could add the scientific name for this plant. That's the kind of stuff that, you know, just sits there and sometimes doesn't get done, but we are able to kind of focus on that kind of work this summer, and just following the lead of the dictionary leaders to figure out what needs to get done. And so looking forward to next summer, we're so excited that there's continued interest in the communities that you all are working with, Gabe, and we really hope we can make it happen next summer.
Yes, absolutely. So for those who are watching, Brook has put the link in for donations, and she's also included links to Moises and Felipe's Twitter accounts, so you could follow them. And the links to the donations will also be loaded on to the Maguey YouTube channel. I still have a couple more follow-up questions, if that's all right. A couple of, I think they now have to do sort of with the technological aspect of it. One is a question that Misty had, which is, are you able to see where people are accessing the dictionary from through their IP address, and does that help you sort of get a sense of who's accessing it? Is there a way to trace that and check your reach? I don't know if that's something that's part of the program, or that it's more for the IT department. But
yes, we use Google Analytics. It's not something that I share with the team. It's not something I check often myself. But you're right, that would exactly tell us, you know, is the folks in California accessing it more than the folks in Oaxaca? I also something I want to use Google Analytics for is, are people searching for words that they're not finding? You know, that could be reported back to the directors of the dictionaries for their knowledge. People are looking for these words. Do you want to add them? Right.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, there's a lot that can be done from that analytical side, and it doesn't always have to be in person, right? When I spoke to the Cabildo in Chichicapam, they were excited about the opportunity because it sounded to them like it could provide opportunities for the youth in the town. Whether the youth were already speaking Zapotec or not, they saw it as a means to have a little bit more advanced technological education, whether it has to do with the voice recorders or the computers, or maybe really having a different perspective on how to use this social media accounts, Facebook or Twitter. And I like this, which is, instead of doing it for friendship, you do it for activist purposes, right? And it really changes the approach to how you could teach how to use the technology and how they could apply it. And so I think that's a really important message moving forward. So for benefits to the community, because, you know, as part of the building trust that you guys spoke about, they said, sure, you can come in and we can give you some space and we can see what happens from there, as long as it seems like it's providing opportunities for the youth in our village, right? And And so then that's part of our responsibility is, and maybe before the students come, is making sure people are familiar with the technology before the students arrive, so that when they arrive, they can focus on those stories that populate the dictionary. Would you agree that it's, I mean, how is that learning curve with the technology? It sounds in some instances they can access it with their phone quite easily, but if they're actually participating and populating it, then there's a little bit more of a learning curve, correct?
I think the way we tend to work is whatever someone wants to learn, right? We're there to show them that. And people tend to have very different interests. Sometimes, especially older people, maybe just want to record words. But sometimes younger folks want to know how it all works. And I could even imagine, like, when the students come, like, the students could also be charged. They've been trained on the recording devices. They've been trained on the audio editing, right? They've been trained on the database. And they could then in turn teach any of the younger folks too who want to know, right? So that it really is all this circular learning, and that really anything that people want to know about how it works behind the scenes is something they're welcome to.
One of the things that I really would like to do in the future, if possible. I know that, for example, in Teotitlán del Valle, they have embedded videos. And I talked about preserving memories, right? One of the things that I could see adding to the dictionaries with a camera and a video of talking and showing in Zapotec the community and what is important to me and my community in terms of maybe historical points for the, and as I think Moisés pointed, like, you know, the need for immigrants and young immigrants, or maybe first or second generation, to know where their parents came from through their own language. So it's something that I would be really interested in just thinking about what it was done with the online from Teotitlán del Valle. They have an incredible video in weaving and explaining, you know, how weaving is done. So yeah, I think that while you were thinking about, like, okay, how else can we use it through technology? And I think that also telling stories, historic stories, to be embedded there, like, you know, for example, sites that are important for the community, and just telling that story to the outside world.
Cool.
Something else that occurs to me, you know, we have a lot of photos. Maybe the youth, maybe there's some artists. Maybe they want to create the art for the dictionary. Maybe there's folks who want to learn how to take photography or like to take photos and want better equipment, right? Like, there's so many spaces where creativity could be used, and any town could set up a social media account for their dictionary, tweet out words of the day, do something on a TikTok. You know, there's really whatever the youth want to do with this on a community level, right?
And then, so for the participants who are still on it, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them into the chat or to the Q&A box. But one other follow-up question, I've had this discussion with Kate, but maybe Felipe and Moisés or Brook have more insight into it. Has this generated interest in Mexican linguistic students, either in Oaxaca or other parts of Mexico? And have they shown interest in possibly participating in this project?
I sometimes get emails from students in Mexico who want to participate. One complication here has to do with the funding. So Kate and I are often able to fund the students, our students, through campus internal funds for Haverford and Swarthmore and Bryn Mawr students. Mm-hmm. And so we have not included Mexican students so far. I'm trying to think if maybe there was an exception to that. Partly because of the funding. I don't know where to get the funding to fund them.
However, there have been students who have heritage in Oaxaca, right? Who have family in Oaxaca that are students at our colleges. So we do try to incorporate those students, involve those students.
Okay, cool.
But, you know, it's any project can sort of take a direction, you know, any different direction that that arises and that is feasible, and that the community, again, that the community wants it to go in. So if there are, it's not that students can't be involved in these projects, it's that, you know, that is just another sort of logistical thing that needs to be worked out to have students who are from Mexico join the project. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. And it's probably obvious, but we haven't said this clearly. We don't start working with our students like day one in Oaxaca. We start working with our students months beforehand. There's hours and hours of training in ethics and equipment, in Zapotec language and culture and history. And so if there were other students incorporated into this project, then that would be also a very important part to include, because you just don't show up day one to help on a dictionary.
Yeah.
That's hours and hours into it.
Yeah, there's the prerequisites, right? So that has to be there. Okay, I think maybe one other question, Doc, like, I guess what I'm getting here is it's an open book and you can frame different aspects of the culture or society and provide translations along with that, including, have there been documented festivals, maybe videos of festivals, and, or I don't know, in the case, as somebody made like a mini documentary and they could be speaking in Zapotec, but it's subtitled in Spanish or English. But
Actually, yes, go ahead, Moisés and Brook. Do you want to talk about the documentary that that you made? I don't think we can hear you, Moy. I don't know if you're talking.
Yes, sorry, Brooke, can you go ahead and start?
Go ahead. I'm pulling it up to put it in the.
Okay, good. Okay, well, yes, yes, we do. We have a very interesting documentary that focused on Zapotec heritage in the town of Tlacochahuaya. There were 10 episodes that focused on food, dance, music, and traditional recipes. So this is something really, really good, because it's another way, it's another tool that we have to show not only members of the community, but general public. What is it about to be a Zapotec town? And especially because this documentary focused on the question, what does it mean to you to be a Zapotec? Do you identify yourself as a Zapotec? And if so, how do you do that? So we take the idea that language is one tool that can make us feel Zapotec. In my case, for example, speaking the language makes me feel and identify myself as Zapotec. But it's not the only feature. Food, dance, music, lifestyle, agriculture also is part of this. And this is what we wanted to respond or to show the people through this documentary. And it was a really, really good experience filming it and putting it together in the web and the way we presented it. And I know Brooke can tell us more about it.
I put the link in the chat for those of you watching. You can go there. And I just want to point out then, because when you're dealing with under-resourced situations like we are here, we want to make use of all this that communities are doing. So that documentary then fed into the Talking Dictionary. So for example, there's a whole 3-minute or 4-minute episode on making beans with lagu, with this herb, hierba de conejo, is that right?
Yes.
So then now if you go to the entry for beans in Moisés's dictionary, you have this embedded YouTube video that's a whole 4 or 5-minute documentary on it. So that's one of the reasons that when we realized a lot of this work that was happening on YouTube and Twitter, we went back to the designers of the dictionary and they figured out a way to embed that so that really this encyclopedic knowledge that Gabe was talking about can really come through, because like Moy said, the word isn't just the word. The word is a story and a recipe and sometimes a 4-minute documentary.
Thank you. I'll make sure to check out that documentary series, and I just want to take another moment to thank you guys for your time today. I'm sure we might have follow-up questions in the future as we're getting closer to a new prospective date. But do any of you have anything you'd like to add, Kate or Brooke, Moises or Felipe, as a follow-up?
Well, I just really hope that people who are willing to support this Talking Dictionary for Chichicapam, you know, I think that they would be doing such a great deed, because I really, really feel very lucky that I've had this online dictionary for my community, and then preserve the language and then pass it on. And it's you know, something that we would leave for the younger generation and those who can and are willing to support it. I think that I'm just very grateful to them that will make it possible for Chichicapam to have such an incredible tool.
Yes, and especially because we know that in not only in Chichicapam, but in other towns, we have very talented people who are willing to work, who are eager to work in a project like this. They just need that push, that encouragement, or in some other situations, well, the financial help. Well, this is a very great tool, and I'm really happy for Chichicapam because they're one of my students. Omar is elementary school teacher, but suddenly he has transitioned from elementary school to activist in language preservation. He showed us some of his work last summer, and we were amazed at the things that he's doing from being an elementary school teacher. So that means we have very talented people out there who are willing to work. And I know by watching this, well, we expect that not only Chichicapam joins as the time progresses, well, we'll have many other dictionaries from other towns. Thank you.
Thank you both. Kate, Brooke, do you have any final thoughts or comments?
I'll just say thank you, Gabe, for inviting us. And, you know, I've heard Brooke and Felipe and Moy talk about the Talking Dictionaries now a few times, and I learned something new every time. And so even for me, this was really wonderful to hear again from all of you. And you know, I think it really achieved the purpose here of re-energizing me about future Talking Dictionary work. So thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Gabe, for having us. And for those of you who are logged on, thanks for wanting to learn about this. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks so much again for your time. Thank you for our listeners, participants, and we'll keep getting the message out, and hopefully it can lead to some future donations for both programs. So looking forward to future talks, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and you get through these crazy times safe and sound and in good health.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.